the obvious ridiculousness of the situation as it stands. If you look at around the world every year, there's 5.5 million people that die of tobacco-related diseases. And as many people that a year annually succumb to death through legally and profitably and respectively marketed products as died in the entire Second World War in the anti-Jewish genocide run by the Nazis. And then they state that states must prohibit DMT. Think about it. My work in the last 11 years has been with downtown East Side clients heavily addicted to a whole range of substances, chiefly narcotics and stimulants. And it was about 1.5 years ago that I first found out about ayahuasca. People have been asking me for years, and I knew nothing whatsoever. But then last July I had the opportunity to participate in some ceremonies here up in Vancouver with an itinerant Peruvian shaman who came with a whole troupe of musicians and so on, and it was an extraordinary experience. And I knew right away that this is a great treatment for addiction. Now there's 3 ways of knowing, of course, and apart from the intellectual way of knowing, there's also the experiential way of knowing, where you experience something and you just get it, and then intuitive. Now if you think about addiction, it's basically a compound of 2 losses. One is an emotional loss of trust in the world, an emotional loss of knowledge of yourself, an emotional loss of sense of belonging, and an emotional loss of respect for one's own truth. And as I point out in my book on addiction, the early abuse not only cripples people emotionally and psychologically, it also shapes the brain in certain ways. That the very brain circuits that are involved in addiction, the opiate, endorphin circuitry, the dopaminergic incentive motivation circuits, the impulse and the stress regulation circuits, all are distorted in their development by the abuse. And when I say distorted, I mean biochemically and structurally, so that you can actually do brain scans on people and see the damage. So McGill University actually showed that early abuse specifically damages the DNA functioning of the brain. So in fact, it's not far from genetics controlling things. The genes themselves are affected by, in their functioning, by early experience. So there's that deep emotional loss. There's also the physiological loss of circuits being distorted in their development. So that's the one kind of loss. The second loss in addiction, that underlies addiction, is a spiritual one. Buddha to Jesus to Muhammad to the shamanic teachings of tribal cultures around the world have anything to say whatsoever. What they're actually saying is that the self itself is a delusion, that in fact we're all just manifestations of life, not just, we're all manifestations of life, and that being that we're manifestations of the same life process, the separation itself is illusory, and that we belong to the whole greatness of it all, and it belongs to us, in fact it is us, and that the separation between individuals is also an illusion and a delusion. And all the spiritual paths are designed in one way or another to help people afraid of the thing, that they don't actually ever look at it in a way to work it through. Because if you work it through, then you realize there's not much to be afraid of. Because all that happened a long time ago. It doesn't reflect reality in the present, necessarily. So addiction is a desperate escape from pain. What the plant does is it shows you exactly what you're running away from. You can't run away from the truth of it and you've done the plant. Now, I'm not saying that every experience is like that, but some people will have some very frightening experiences with the plant, in the sense of they'll have manifestations, physical manifestations of some pretty scary things. Now, I've never quite had that, but I think possibly because I've worked things through over years. I've had some difficult experiences with the plant, but nothing really scary or overwhelmingly frightening. I also have one of those beautiful pictures that can't show us either. But okay, because you have the experiences that you have. So it shows you all the stuff that you've been running away from. And that's good. And all the stuff you've been running away from is stuff that was inculcated in you before you had any choice in the matter. When you're very small, helpless, vulnerable, and exposed. So it shows you that in a way that allows you now to embrace the outside of yourself and to work with it positively. Then the other thing that it shows you is that there's no way to run away from anything, because there is in fact that connection. There is in fact that truth inside. There is in fact that love inside. That you don't need to run around looking for love. It's actually in there. It's an inevitable and natural and unconditioned part of who you actually are as a human being. When you actually experience that, there's no more fear. There's no more loss. Because the loss of love is relative. The presence of love is absolute when you have that experience. And this may sound like New Age mumbo jumbo, and I would certainly would not have found myself talking like this even 5 years ago. But that's just what the experience shows you. It shows it to you. So therefore, you have what you're running away from, giving you a chance to process it, and the clear experience of not having to run anywhere, because you're okay exactly where you are. So it's a wonderful treatment of addiction. I don't need 15 double-blind placebo controlled studies. Tell me that. So I began to work with it in Nelson this year with some people who are here. Carrie was there as one of the facilitators. We had a program on addiction, a 5-day program, where we had incorporated 2 ayahuasca ceremonies into it. Now, everybody's talked about the importance of the ceremonial context. The problem with LSD in the 1960s was that it was the sorcerer's apprentice. Immature people in isolation from mentors and tradition and knowledge used it, and of course it becomes dangerous. And I'm afraid that some people are using ayahuasca that way at all. It has less risk potential, but there are people in Vancouver who just invite several dozens of people, hand them the stuff, and there's no ceremony, there's no context, there's no processing. I think that's an irresponsible, in fact, there's nothing good to be said about that practice whatsoever. And that actually endangers the work that we're trying to do. Because that's going to lead to negative consequences, and those negative consequences will be associated with the plant, rather than with the immature and unsupported fashion in which the plant was employed. But in its appropriate context, what happens is that, and the other thing with ayahuasca is that for many years in North America, including in Vancouver, people would come to ceremonies, they would drink the plant, they'd have their whatever experiences, and that people found it useful and helpful and great, but there'd be no processing of their experience, so that it wasn't contextualized, and that supportive community wasn't created around it, that in the Peruvian Amazon is taken for granted. So what we've developed then is a model of creating at least an intentional community for a few days, where we'll get to know one another, and where nothing happens that isn't processed. So therefore, for the participants, and including for the shamanically trained people that I've worked with, I think that the experience has been revelationary, in the sense that the power of the plant to bring people to truth is much enhanced when people are then supported in this community-based, skillfully led processing. So that my work as a teacher and psychotherapist and physician is immeasurably enhanced with the plant. It's just like takes away barriers that might take a long time to get through. And on the other hand, their work is enhanced by the processing that I help to provide. I'm working with some Aboriginal women in the Downtown East Side, terribly abused, terribly addicted, and we're going to introduce ayahuasca into their healing process. The CDC documentary program, The Nature of Things, is about to embark on a 9-month filming of a documentary on the treatment on the use of ayahuasca in addiction. So I'll be a part of that as well. So there's going to be a lot more stuff about this publicly after that program is aired. It is successfully filmed, and I think it will be, which will bring both possibilities and dangers. The possibility of then moving forward in a broader way with this work, and the danger, of course, of inviting public scrutiny that might bring the hand of the the deadening cloud of the law upon this healing process. So I'll finish with that and we look forward to the discussion.